Come a little closer and lend me your ears. Don't worry, you keep yours while I keep mine.
In each episode, we'll dig into the major stories, uncover the truth, and retrieve gems from Yada's blog.
We'll discuss what's right, bark about what's wrong, wag our tails at the thrill of discovery, and take you on adventures through the exciting world we live in today. So, fasten your curiosity leash and get ready.
Right then, coming to you with another episode of the Yada's Vlog on a Blog. Tomorrow's news, disseminated today. Let's dive in.
Disseminated today is a fairly erudite term for a Wookiee, don't you think?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I don't really use the word disseminated, so I know my dogs don't, so that's not bad for Wookiee.
Yeah, it's not bad for Wookiee. He did watch that whole introduction. We have Will joining us today. You're not a new face to us because you participate in Family Hour. But now that you're here making the first appearance on the vlog on the blog, you're in the hot seat for a moment or two. Will, we get to know a little bit more about you since that's the new style of the show. How long have you been? Oh, there you are. You're the big. You're the big. Oh, you're in the big picture now.
Oh yeah,
set
me up.
When did you first? When were you first introduced to Yawa and to Yasha'Yah?
That would have been September of 2019, and it was the Jeff Rent show. And there's a number of people specifically because of that show came on board. But I remember hearing for the first time Yawa's name, and I was just dumbstruck. I remember riding home after listening to it saying, man, I really hope that's his name because that's a great name. And I bought Introduction to God based on that interview with, and you know, what's funny is I had walked away from Rents years prior because he's such a conspiratorialist and he's really an anti-Semite. I mean, I couldn't tolerate that. But anyway, for whatever reason, I was there on that day and you were on and you were sort of positioned as an expert on the Dead Sea Scrolls. And so I thought, all right, that's interesting. I can listen to that. And it was just really, I felt at home so quickly because after so many years in religion, they're all the same. It's just the same thing over and over regurgitated, but there was something so unique about what you were saying. And I always wanted to know God. That's always been a very important driving thing for me. And it was very frustrating trying to work with the scraps of religion and try to put it together. And so many things just didn't make sense. You walk away from it because it's irrational, but you know, how do you find God? And well, I found out how we Yasha'Yah.
Yeah, you know, what's interesting is that had to be one of the very last interviews that I did because it was, you say in 2019, that's only 7 years ago. 7 years ago, I was already making my way here, probably on the boat Cara, maybe already here in the Virgin Islands, but if not, it was in the Bahamas, having begun the process of moving in this direction. And at the time, I think it was Jerry McLaughlin who was managing my communication via radio. He did it as gratis. It was kind of a labor of love for him, and it worked out really well for both of us. But I had pretty much stopped doing radio interviews, and unless he had somebody that specifically asked for me and was pushing him to get me on the show, I just stopped doing them because one of the challenges, Will, is that once you start and you have an interesting interview with somebody, and I would say 90%, maybe 95% of the interviews I did were unusual in the sense that a typical guest spot on a talk radio show is geared to be 7 minutes long, with the host talking for 5 of those 7 minutes.
Right.
And you get a quick answer, and then he turns it into whatever he wants to, and then or she, and then you go. And almost all of those that I did, the opening segment was the full hour, and many of them, the show went 2 2 or 3 hours, and on all of them, save maybe 1 or 2% of them, was always the program manager and the host inviting me back, and we'd do more and more shows, and so it became such that I was doing talk radio shows 7 or 8 hours a day that I was on various talk radio channels. It very different kind of time, though, of course, Will, than now. And the talk radio was the rage back then.
Yeah.
And then liberals, particularly it was the gay lobby that went against talk radio because they couldn't earn a spot where they could generate an audience. The Marxist liberals never made talk radio effective for them.
No.
So the only approach was to do boycotts against the shows that were conservative. And
Limbaugh, Hannity.
Yeah, absolutely. And so they started boycotting their advertisers, and they created enough havoc in the industry that they destroyed talk radio as an industry. You know, it's probably a tiny fraction. I would say it's 5% of its height today. Now, of course, the other thing that came about over time is the social media, where on X you can do a video version of talk radio, and same thing is true with the YouTube channel and with Facebook. So I think it would have died a death anyway. People spend less time in their cars listening to all this sort of thing. So, but it was interesting. I don't remember that particular host at all. You know, when I probably did 10,000 hours of talk radio. So after a while, you lose track of who you did. I think I remember doing a program where the interest was how different the Dead Sea Scrolls were than what is reported in religious texts. So it's interesting that was the call. You know, I guess if we had more time, I might go back to doing guest appearances on whether it's YouTube channels or X or Facebook. One of the challenges today is that, as you mentioned, that particular fellow was an anti-Semite. It's really tough to find a host with any size of an audience that isn't an anti-Semite. Yeah.
Or conspiratorial.
Or conspiratorialist. And we're opposed to both. I think all conspiracies are idiotic, and most are unbelievably stupid. And that conspiracy is this grand sinkhole where credibility goes to die.
Yeah.
And being an anti-Semite is the antithesis of what we stand for.
That's right.
And both of those two things, either overt politics, you're promoting MAGA, you're promoting Twistianity, you're promoting Islam, you're promoting a conspiracy, or you're promoting your hatred of Jews. And I think the hatred of Jews has become the unifying foundation for the most popular internet-based social media influencers. And what that tells me is that the only way to be popular as an influencer is to speak against Israel.
That's right. And we have proof of that. You know, Candace Owens is out there. Tucker's breaking records.
Yes.
You know,
and you can't be more moronically anti-Semitic than Tucker. And he is establishing new records in terms of leadership. And what that tells me is that our move away from social media and just turning exclusively to Yasha'Yah.com was appropriately timed. I got so disgusted with that environment. It felt like every day you had to spend time in a cesspool. And we had a brief period on Facebook where you could communicate and create a kind of a family atmosphere. But even that deteriorated, and it deteriorated multiple ways. One is the feed on Facebook. Well, 3 ways, I think. The feed on Facebook became riddled with anti-Semitic, MAGA, Muslim, Marxist, conspiratorial trash.
Yeah.
And all you can do to it is say it's not true. And what was happening, the second problem with Facebook is that not only were you in that swamp, and it's not good to air Yahweh's message in a swamp like that, but the Facebook would then shut down or penalize the account and its reach by claiming that you were promoting that which you were saying that Facebook was actually promoting in your feed. And I would say, no, this is trash.
Yeah.
And so to be constantly harassed by Facebook for calling what they were promoting trash got really old. And then there was this malignant group of dunderheads that have formed the Mother Goddess cult. They had decided that they would hashtag my name, and they were incapable of drawing an audience by saying anything that was of interest to anybody. So their only way to justify their existence was hashtagging my name, and then trying to discredit me. That just gets old. I mean, God had so much to say condemning them. And the last prophecy we revealed about them, God actually says, I'm sending them to hell. But they continue. Rich was there today to see the nutcases, and you can have social media, and we couldn't leave it, of course. And by the way, X is worse than Facebook, although Facebook has gotten so bad of late that it's a rival now for which one is worse, X or Facebook. And they're run by AI, and the AI is grossly immoral and completely inadequate logically. It wasn't until we got the Yasha'Yah.com website so that it could replicate every benefit of social media without the cesspool that we were able to say, well, just move. We just don't need any presence in social media. I haven't been to X or even my own page in Facebook. I haven't been there in 3 months.
Yeah, it's a good decision. I still habitually just pop on, see what's going on, and it as you know, the anti-Semitism is just baffling, and then it's really sad to see some Jews that you could really root for. It's just sad to see how they're talking about how Hashem is not going to abandon them, and it's just they're as deluded as everybody else. It's just sad to see that, and you can beat your head against the wall and stand up against it and prove your mettle to Yahweh maybe, but other than that, it's not productive. It just is not. So you are right to get off that.
No, we were never able to develop a meaningful audience with Israelites on Facebook. But when we began on X, there was a very significant group of pro-Israeli voices that were frustrated as hell on that platform, because that platform is exceedingly anti-Israel, X is. But we could talk to them and we could say, you're promoting Donald Trump. He is, according to the prophets, the great betrayer. You're promoting Netanyahu. He is leading you down a path where you're going to be completely isolated, such that there will be nothing that you're going to be able to do to salvage Israel. You're trusting a Hashem that you wrote his name out of your lives and out of your nation's existence, and he's not going to return to you until you return to him. And so we routinely tried to get their attention and tell them what was going to happen, and to a person, they either didn't listen or blocked us, because they didn't want to hear it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what were you going to gain?
Yeah, it really folds into with our topic today. I know we're staying on Yasha'Yah 17:4, but you go down to Yasha'Yah 17:8 when he talks about how they will put so much emphasis on their altars and their altars of religion and their groves of politics. That is exactly what Israel's doing today.
It is. It is exceedingly sad. So, just to get a better feel for you, Will, So this was 7 years ago that you heard this presentation on the Dead Sea Scrolls and the pronouncement of Yahweh's name in the midst of that. And based on listening to it, you were intrigued enough to go to the Yasha'Yah.com website and began reading.
Yes. And I read that website. It was only a few days. It took me to read everything on the website. And then by then I had ordered the book, I guess from Amazon or somebody, Introduction to God. And so I was only pages into it. I knew I was home right away. You know, I tried a lot of different things, or at least studied a lot of different things in my attempt to find God, only to come up empty time and time again. And this is so different. You are so different in your teaching style and your significance that really attracted me. I mean, I knew there was something here because it was so different. I mean, it stood out over and above everything else. And that's because it really held reason and logic up as, you know, the very significant. So it just made all the sense in the world to me, and I was at home very quickly.
Yeah, it's true that the thing that differentiates what I have been sharing for the last quarter century is that we go to the oldest extant sources of Yahweh's testimony, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and we scrub every word of the rabbinic, religious, diacritical markings that have influenced religious translations. And then we look at the verbal roots of each word very systematically to deduce its meaning as clearly and completely as is possible. And then we create an amplified translation that is unlike any presentation of Yahweh's testimony ever. We include Yahweh's name as it properly should be pronounced. And we actually pay attention to the stems that have been largely negated in Hebrew, the moods that have been completely written out of the language, and the conjugations that have also been written out of the language. So if you're trying to read the Torah, for example, in modern Hebrew, you're going to find it heavily influenced by the Masoretes, who created a religious interpretation, devoid of the mood, so you don't know whose volition is being conveyed, largely devoid of the stems, so you don't know the relationship between the subject and object, and change to a typical language where there's a past, present, and future tense, as opposed to the Hebrew language of the Torah and prophets, where there's only completed and incomplete action, and with verbs that are free, released throughout time. I mean, it's a very different kind of message, which is the reason why we did it this way and created that unique amplified translation capability. And then, you know, if our translation was radically different, which it typically was, then English translations and presentations explained what the difference was. I said, here's your options, would go through the history of a word if it needed elucidation, and then made comparisons to other things God had said so that you could go from knowing to understanding. Yes. And then just systematically going to where the words lead.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, we don't emote our way to God. We think our way to God. And when you said that, and just all the thinking you have to do, it just makes more sense. You know, emotion as a language isn't very good, but logic is. And it's a great way to communicate because we can all get on the same page and it becomes more like almost mathematical, and there's a certainty to it. And you end up with hardcore answers instead of just superfluous emotions, which are hard to really get your arms around. How do you love your neighbor as yourself all the time and constantly give up what you want for everybody else? You know, all the saints Catholics think they're producing. It's really, that's just such a, well, it's the wrong way to approach God. And if he's not going to respond to it, no matter how sincere and how good of a person you are, it just doesn't matter your deeds. You could all day long do good things, and that's not what we're looking for.
Yeah. Why would you forgive somebody that has done some heinous crime, particularly as a member of your family? Why would you believe that God could be a man? Why would you believe that men could kill God?
Yeah.
Why would you believe that bodily resurrection was a solution to anything?
Mhm.
You know, why believe a New Testament when it contradicts the Torah, prophets, and Psalms, which it claims to be based in every possible way?
Yeah.
Why would you believe a religion where the founder of that religion, Paul, the man that wrote the first 14 books of the New Testament, admits he's demon possessed? You know, I was fortunate. I had been able to discard Christianity and completely disjoin myself from religious faith by thinking my way through the process. And then you start with a clean slate and an open mind, and you can find out if Yahweh is trustworthy. You find out what his name is and does he present a case, and you don't have to worry about the fact that God's presentation is completely annulled by Christianity and Judaism and Islam. You can take what he has to say on its own merits and then deal with the lies of Christianity, Islam, and Judaism separately, which we have uniquely done. No one has ever written 13 volumes to disprove Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, while also writing some 20 plus volumes, almost 25 volumes now, demonstrating the authenticity of Yahweh's testimony as it's revealed in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Yeah. No.
Nice comparison. So you've been comfortable with your journey and have found reinforcement for what you came to conclude.
Oh yeah. I mean, you know, you come to a point where you yada Yahweh, you do know Yahweh. What you're doing is, you know, the Torah is really just God's perspective. He's telling his side of the story, how he perceives it. And the quicker you can get on board with his vision, the better it's going to be. And one of the things that I found, which is sort of a hack with all of this to bend the curve a little bit, is to really study the Psalms. And when you read Psalm 119 and what Dode, you know, I think there's 8 different verbs in there that point to observing. It's not just shamar. There's natsar. There's all kinds. And that's how Dode did it, through careful, and not that we shouldn't shama listen, but observation is so critical. And through that process, Dode hit the heights of heaven, and he could boldly tell Yahweh what Yahweh thought about things. And, you know, when you can come to that point where you can say, Yahweh, you want me to be better or to succeed, or, sharing your testimony or whatever, there's a tremendous confidence that comes along with reading the Psalms and trying to follow specific instructions that Dode gives throughout his Psalms. I remember I was going to say Psalm 118. It says, I think it's choose to articulate what you know about Yahweh. And I did that as an exercise one time, only to realize I didn't have very much. And so now when I read Yahweh's testimony, I try to read it with a view towards getting another glimpse of his character, another side of who he is. And then you come to a place where you can literally say in Psalm 116, I am in love. Because everything Yahweh has us do, he's always has us, he's thinking about us. It's always a benefit to us. You don't take a haircut when following Yahweh. And that doesn't mean that there's not tough times or whatever. It builds our character. But you really, at the bottom of it, I mean, you really do find an adorable father. You really do.
Yeah, I think that the path that we have followed the last year and maybe up to 18 months, ever since we were able to distance ourselves from the curmudgeons that have gone their own separate way with Mommy God, is that the whole goal has been to try to understand Yahweh's story from his perspective.
Yeah.
You know, we've spent 24 years prior to that time just simply saying, this is what he said, this is what it means, and this is how it compares to other things that God has said. And so we learned a lot and came to probably 10,000 profoundly important insights that were previously unheralded, and 25,000 pages of translations and commentary. But then when we began this program, the Yahweh blog, we began to say, knowing these things, understanding these things is great. But what we began is just to pursue, how is Yahweh presenting this story? Who are the people he chose to work with? What are they really like? What did God have to say about them? What is his plan? What is the timing that he wants to carry it out? And what is he not only offering us, but what is he looking for in return? And so we just returned to the beginning in the garden and said, well, this actually answers the whole story. This is who Adam really is. He happens to be Dode. This is why it didn't work in the garden. This is why God booted Adam out of the garden without ending his relationship with him. And this is how he supported him thereafter. And these are the characters that were introduced to us in the first, second, third, fourth, fifth chapters of Bereshith, Genesis, and how those same souls are redeployed throughout God's story, because this is the people he wants to work with and how he likes to work through chosen individuals to accomplish his ends. And ultimately, it gets right down to Dode is his firstborn, but he's a firstborn that needs support. Dode didn't do particularly well on his own, and he did worse when he was in the company of others, and even worse when he was given lots of things, power and authority. And he performs best when he's in a loving, supportive family environment. And God learned that about him, and consequently, every time we see Dode represented, he's back in that loving, nurturing, supportive family environment. And we find out how God recreated it for him during each of his 5 lives thus far and 6th overall.
I think it shows how intimate Yahweh really is, and how he is so trustworthy and reliable. He's deploying the same souls, but he must find that these souls are great examples of how to be trustworthy and reliable. And when you think about the story of Ruth and Boaz, I mean, that's just, Yahweh's just very intimate and personal. And you can just see the love and how he stays committed to the same people, ups and downs with many of them. And he gives them what they need. And it just really, just in the last couple months, I've just really seen how intimate Yahweh is like that.
I like the how Will mentioned earlier, Yada Yahweh, coming to know Yahweh. Well, there's another side of that as well. As I come to know Yahweh more, I also put myself in a position where I want to be known by him, where he knows me and he knows that he can rely on me. He knows that when be one of those souls that hey, I can be deployed. Hey, put me in, coach. I'm ready for work. And part of that is with you, Will, stepping up and doing shows and working on the grammar projects and everything, stepping outside of your comfort zone and moving into making sure that Yahweh knows you too. He knows Will. Will knows knows Yahweh, right? But Yahweh needs to know Will too. So
that was really the entire purpose of this last deployment as Yada, is to develop a group of people, a team, a family that could be relied upon, so that it wasn't one person supporting another, but instead a entire family that we would all present ourselves as knowledgeable of what God was saying, good listeners to what he was conveying to us, thoughtful about what he had to say, such that we were responsive, engaged, and eager to demonstrate that we were all willing to see it through. We'll remove the obstacles along the way. We'll get her done. And we'll be there standing in the end, ready to be redeployed in whatever God needs. And this is the first time in 6,000 years where God can actually trust a group of people that is who have all been prepared, equipped, enabled, and now are desirous of being deployed as standing grain, as leaders among people, such that he can now bring his remnant into the garden, and knowing that he has the right people in place to ensure they have the highest likelihood of succeeding.
Yeah.
That's a long way to come. I think that's where we are.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's been a wonderful 7 years. I know many people have been with you 20 or 25, and that is just, wow, the growth that they've been able to experience. But even just in these 7 years, I mean, all of a sudden, when we realized Dode as the Pesach Ayil, it just seemed to open up the floodgates, every time. And it's neat. Every time we have a new kind of paradigm shift, when you go back to the Torah, everything seems different. Like when we discovered that the Pesach Ayil was Dode, I see it everywhere now. Everywhere it just seems to speak to that. It's like, how did that happen?
How could there have been 1,000 affirmations that Dode would fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim in 33 CE, meaning that at the very least, even if you didn't know the whole story, he had to have 3 lives. The life of the shepherd boy that became king, the life of the person who would ultimately lay down his physical body as the Lamb of God on Passover, take our guilt into Sheol on Matzah, and then demonstrate what it is to be a firstborn child into God's family on Bikurim. And then God says very unequivocally, he's coming back as king of forevermore. So Dode had to have 3 lives. It's emphatic through the story. And then you realize that Dode can't be the firstborn if he doesn't appear in the story until year 3,000 Yah. But yet Yahweh calls him the Bakor. And so you're now you're prone to say, well, when did he first appear? And then you realize that Dode, as the firstborn and the man who is the most acclaimed in God's story, had good days and bad days, and his bad days were as bad as anyone. Yeah. And that isn't uncommon, because so did Moshe.
Yeah.
Even so did Elia, who we know are repeat players in God's story. But it doesn't get any better or worse than it is with Dode. And then we were confronted with how his relationship with Yahweh was restored after Dode went into, and Yahweh entered a time of not speaking to one another. Yeah. How was that restored? And we read it in the 31st Mashal, and which you have to be, if you're going to see God's story his way and fit into his story as one who can make a contribution to it, you have to be open to the fact that he's pretty exceptional. And now that Dode has 3 lives, and you see, wait a minute, he had a surrogate mother and father who got him back on track. And it ultimately happened through the 89th Mizmor, which was co-authored by an Ethan Ha-Ezraki. And you read what that guy's name means, and you say, I've seen that name before, at least the meaning of it. And that was all the way back with Chinook. Yeah. And then you read what Chinook names mean, and you say, wait a minute, this is the same personality. Yeah. This is the same personality with the same mission. And all of a sudden now you have an understanding of how God can keep his story on track with the results that he wants, without interfering with free will, and it becomes ever more magnificent. Yeah, probably my favorite part is to have to go right back to the beginning and say, now let's figure out how many times Dode has been here, and let's see how Yahweh supported him, because now we know through the final word picture in the 89th Mizmor the role that was used, and then you're confronted with the person that Kevin is mentioning, and he has that wheat field behind him. Ruth and Boaz, they're the heart of the story.
Yes. No.
Yeah, they show God's heart.
They do, and his commitment.
They show the covenant as it was meant to be, and they present the kinsman redeemer as the result.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's really
remarkable.
Yeah, so magnificent. Well, that was quite an introduction, but I think your story is our story. It's the covenant story. It's Yahweh's story, and it's why I'm encouraging us to create a number of different Yahweh blog spinoffs. One of them is Thinking Torah, where those who just express an intellectual fascination with the Torah host a show that is Thinking Torah. And then we have, our last guest host on this program was Matt with Cats. Matt is more emotional. And as a more emotional person, loving Torah and how it affects our lives and the people that are part of the covenant family, I see that as being an important venue. And those that have a more emotional fit can host that show. Those whose whole approach to this is cerebral, we have a lot to offer, but it's not all that God has to offer.
That's right.
So we can do a Thinking Torah show, and those who find comfort in both can, watch the one that they prefer. So I'm hoping we do that going forward. And then I'd also like us to be able to have a program with, now about 130 some odd people that are members of the Yasha'Yah site, is to be able to go through the majority of those and introduce their past and how they came to this. I just think it would make an interesting way for those who will be witnessing what's presented at Yasha'Yah.com to feel more comfortable with who we are, particularly during the 7 years of trouble, how these people came intellectually to Yah and how they were introduced. So I think that would be good too. Actually, you go back 7 years ago when you were first introduced to Yahweh and to Yasha'Yah.com. Really, all we had then were the books.
Yeah. And the
we
website.
Didn't have anything. There was nothing else to read on that website other than the books. The resources were few and far between, and there wasn't anything on that website other than the books. And now the books, while they're featured, and the library is featured, and the books are so many more than what we had back then, the books now are just part of this website. It is so deep, it has become the home for Yahweh's name. So a lot has happened. All right, there, Kevin. Why don't we go to phase 2 of this program? We said that we were going to talk about a potentially insightful and different way to interpret Yasha'Yah 4. So the reason that Yasha'Yah 4 is important is that Yasha'Yah 4, that'd be Isaiah 4 and 5, they follow a prophetic presentation where God says, the government of Damascus is going to fall. Well, it has. That there's going to be unrest among the refugees in Jordan. He's speaking of the so-called Palestinians, and that has now erupted worldwide. That Israel is going to become more and more vulnerable, and that we're going to see problems that come out of Assyria. Assyria is where we have Iran, and Iraq today is the heart of what was Assyria. And we have this endless war going on where there just is no remedy, that Israel and Trump started, and that Donald Trump is ultimately going to betray Israel in his exit strategy for this. And we're going to see a Islamic State carved out of the heart of Israel by the world, who has come to despise largely Israel. So in the midst of that, we have a preamble to a harvest. And so the question has always been, what are the prerequisites? Because these other things have already happened. Is a thinning Israel at the waist to create a Islamic State, does that have to occur at the very beginning of the time of troubles? And does it have to occur before the harvest? Or is God actually speaking of a a person that is making a tremendous difference in how he is known and perceived with his people, and is that person actually being withdrawn, or both? And is Yasha'Yah 4 to be understood as is Yasha'Yah 5, which speaks of this ingathering and the reaper and the harvest and the gleaning, are both to be perceived as what I would call the telescoping of prophecy, which is very common. Telescoping is that if you look through a telescope at, like there's a marina here, and sometimes Rich will zoom in with a 30 times zoom, and we'll look at things in the distance. When you zoom in through a telescope, things are flattened such that the depth of field always goes away. And that's the same thing with a lot of time with prophecy, where God will speak of events that, in this case, that may be 7 years apart, but he tells them using a verb that will include the first part of that and the second part of it, because from God's point of view, all time is telescoped. It's, what we look like as, whoa, your God is like this. And that's the natural perspective of someone who is energy based, where all time simply is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's some telescoping here, such that God is speaking about near and far, and near and far only separated here by 7 years, and that both of these two play out that way. So let's share. I'm going to share two different preambles to this prophecy that I think are a blend of future history. They seem to incorporate yesterday's headlines, and we're confronted by a tomorrow that seems inevitable. And all of this was foretold 2,700 years ago, so that as these things transpire, whether it's Israel being diminished in size, or a very important withdrawal of an individual who is unique in telling Israel, reacquainting Israel with the name of their God and with the identity of their Savior. God's saying, he's going to be gone for a while, but he's going to come back. But when he comes back, he's going to come back to be sacrificed. So I think we're reading very similar things in Isaiah 17, 4 and 5, but all that are essential to God's people, so that they know what's going to happen. So since there's two accurate ways, I think, to translate the following prophecy, I'm going to offer both, and we posted it on the Yasha'Yah.com chat room environment. And I think both are true. Each is going to occur. And the only issue is, how will one affect the other? What order will they occur in? And what influence do they have on the Shabuah and Teruah harvests? So here's the first of them. And thus far, I think it's been fairly universal, including yourself, Kevin, in saying that most people are prone to view the second version of this as more important than the first version of it. And that was a little bit of a surprise to me, because there's been so much desire for an earlier harvest rather than a later harvest on Shabuah. And the first interpretation makes it absolutely possible for there to be an earlier withdrawal. So let me share it both with you. Then it will occur on this specific day that an upright and respected individual devoted to restoring the dignity and reputation of the very glory of God, as he is empowered and celebrated for providing tremendous value and rewarding benefits, while also being weighted down by carrying the burden of Yaakov, and therefore the covenant, will no longer have a physical presence. Will no longer have a physical presence as he fades away. his influence decreased for a prolonged period. And of the most resilient and anointed fighters, the most abundantly productive heavyweight champions in this regard, his physical body, as the Bashar Herald, is going to disappear, as he will ultimately participate in his own destruction, his body's destruction, with the ongoing implications over time. So that's Yasha'Yah 17:4. Now, of course, that's quite a prophecy, bold even for Yasha'Yah. And it's true that on Shabuah, whether May 22nd of 2026, and I think we have an echo, and I don't know in whose microphone the echo is in, but we definitely have one that is, I don't know how annoying it's going to be actually on the show, but it certainly is fairly strong in my ear. That this prophecy is true regarding Shabuah, whether May 22nd of this year, 11 days from now, coming up quickly, or June 11th of 2027. And in an instant during one of those specific days, Yah was foremost represented at this time, the one restoring his dignity and the one that his people is one trying to raise the esteem of his people, going to fade away and disappear. The upright leader burdened with the responsibility of the covenant with Jacob is going to be removed during the harvest. And we still have a really annoying echo. So again, I don't know who's got it.
I think it's on Will's mic. So Will, if you could just take and mute yourself.
Either mute yourself or figure out a way that you're only hearing this in your ears, not through. If you're hearing this through the show itself, there is a delay, and that will just drive you crazy. So the only way really to listen is to have what we have here, earphones that give it to you in real time as it's being streamed, not the show itself, because the show has, by the time you get it on the internet, it has an 8-second delay. Yep, and that is indeed what we had happening. It's the delay. To participate in a show like this, you have to have the headsets, and you have to be able to listen to the feed at where we're generating it, which is at StreamYard, as opposed to the ultimate presentation, which you think is live, and we call it live, but by the time it goes up in the satellites and processed as StreamYard, and then it's sent to a YouTube or a Facebook or wherever you might be listening, it's about 8 seconds as a delay. So it's true that this individual is going to be resilient. He's going to fight to the very end. He is anointed with the 7 spirits of Yahweh, and therefore that makes all sense as we think about this. And he has been especially productive in cultivating the harvest, and it's certain that he has that this individual is no lightweight, and it says that his body is going to be removed, and that this herald, his message is squandered on many, but nevertheless, the day will come when he will agree to participate in his own destruction, the body's destruction, for the ongoing benefit of Israel's remnant. And all the way through this, every verb was ascribed in the third person masculine singular. We're talking about a singular individual. And that's either the body of Jacob, meaning the state of Israel, or God is speaking of the body of his Bashar, with Bashar meaning body and also human herald, or both. And most of the time when God does this kind of stuff, he uses terms that can be interpreted both ways, so you get a fuller picture of what's occurring. So I'm clearly not surprised that Yahweh would have guided Yasha'Yah to make this disclosure. Their collaboration between Yasha'Yah and Yahweh is always focused on the Chodar as the stem of the tree of knowledge, and serving as the Nakar, the observant foreigner, the Bashar, this human herald. And so his removal is a significant event from their perspective, because that's the purpose of this book, is to talk about his interaction and contribution to Israel. So the whole Yasha'Yah series, the Yahweh blog, the website at Yasha'Yah.com, all of it has been exceedingly influential in the redemption of Jacob, and more so than any other occurrence in the past 2,000 years. That's a big deal. And by the way, we're not trying to sell anybody anything. You could go to Yasha'Yah.com. You can't find anything to buy. Everything is available in its entirety. You won't even find a donate to us button. And if you try to make a donation, you'll be said, well, thank you anyway. We got it from here, and we're not going to change. I didn't notice any place where Moshe said, I'll sell you a copy of the tablets. You want your own personal copy?
Right. No.
Didn't find that. I didn't see Noah charging the animals for participation in the ark. It's just not God's style.
Beshe Yarbasheni, my cup runneth over.
my cup runneth over. And it's working for you. What you quickly find out is I've taken care of you, you take care of my people. I don't care what you try to provide. God's got a much bigger pail. He will provide a lot more than you're able to draw out yourself. So while I think that the void, and we know that void is going to be filled when the voice returns, but for 3 years' time, there's going to be some silence here. And you've heard me try to negotiate with Yahweh. It's his call, but I'd like our 3 years apart to be set up so that we still can communicate. Now, he may view that as a positive or as a negative. I think he would view our desire to do that as a positive, but he also realized his people have to hit rock bottom before they're going to return. And so sometimes, tough love is, I'm just going to let you fall. I've tried to hold you up. I've tried to reach out to you. And after a while, you're just going to let them fall.
Yep.
And so he's going to, he's seen the future, and he knows which of those two options is better. I think that he also knows that if he chooses the let them fall option, then he's going to get an earful for 3.5 years. He's going to say, come on, let us engage. Let us return before the April 18th Passover reintroduction through Elia and Yada. Before that occurs, we're going to be begging him to, come on, there's stuff we can do. There's stuff we can say. There's stuff we can write. There's stuff we can share. The team wants to re-engage. Let us go. We're ready. Put us back in, coach. Be interesting to see how he responds.
I think you make an interesting point, Yada. I direct messaged you on this about how, not the covenant members per se, but you could certainly weigh in with Yahweh. Could it be that he might listen to you? And if you made the case, hey, I think this is what's best for the family and everything going on. Could it be that Yahweh right now doesn't have it set in stone? And that there's you may be able to influence that.
My current assessment is that I have not yet earned that level of access, and not access so much. No, the access has been extraordinary. Yeah. We will grow. God's whole plan is for all of us to grow to the point where God values our input as much as he would his own.
Yeah.
That's where he's trying to take us.
Yes.
Such that we have learned enough, we've done enough together, we have proven ourselves sufficiently that our suggestions will be highly valued with God. I don't see myself as having reached that point. You know, we've been together 6,000 years. We've made a lot of contributions. This time, I think, has been by far the most. And I think we have earned Yahweh's respect. I think we've earned his trust, but we're still playing in his play. This is his program. We're characters in his program. And he put us in and supported us to do what we are doing in his program. And between now and the time that we enter the celebration of Sukkah and return to the garden, I see us as still as players in his play. So I would expect to have very little influence on how he wants it to play out. And I would expect that he would appreciate us nevertheless negotiating for the opportunity to make a contribution. So I think he's expecting us to say, this is what we want to do, and yet be comfortable enough for us to recognize that it's still a ways before our conclusions of what should be done can be considered at the same level of his conclusions of what needs to be done. And the whole outcome here is still so fragile as to changing from being essentially no Israelis who are listening, who have restored Yahweh's name in their lives, who recognize that Dowd is the returning king, who have moved away from religion and from politics to focus, as we have as a covenant family, on God's testimony. I think there's so few that the situation is fluid and fragile.
I think differently. I think this passage in Torah tells us we've already had this conversation. Okay. Now for us, being trapped in the flow of time, we're anticipating the conversation. We want to do our part, but I think the decision's been made, and that this conversation has already been had. You know what I'm saying? And this is the result of it that makes its way into Torah. Just because we just don't see it, we haven't seen it happening yet. It would be like someone telling you you're going to be in the Super Bowl and you're going to win 35-27. Okay. Yeah. And then you still got to show up. You still got to play the game. You still got to go hard. And it's like, I didn't realize we're going to score 7 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to make it 35 and win the game. Okay. But
yes, so I agree with you. I think that we know the outcome because God has told us the outcome, and he has told us how we're going to get there. Really, he's revealed a tremendous amount, and we've been part of the how we're going to get there for a very long time, but particularly in these last 25 years. And as you grow into this role, you naturally try to do what you have come to understand Yahweh wants. And therefore, you see both Dowd and Abraham during his peak, and even Moshe to some extent. You see them after a while expressing, God, this is what I want to do, and I know what I want to do is what you want to do, so let's just do this. Right? So you do see a lot of that. And it's really important in the Psalms and the Mizmor of Yahweh and Dowd communicating with the first and second person volition to say, this is what we both want. Let's get her done. And, I see us doing that. I think we're saying, God, you've expressed, you said, this is what you want, and this is what I want. And so put me in, coach. I'm ready to go. I'm here now. We're doing everything we can. But of course, we're dealing with some miraculous events here now. We aren't going to be here as we are now over the next 7 years. We're just not. And so
That's for sure.
God is going to intervene over the next 7 years in highly miraculous ways, where he has not been highly miraculous with Israel, with rare exceptions, since the beginning of the Exodus.
That's right.
And now he's going to engage with Israel in ways that are almost infinitely more miraculous than what transpired during the Exodus. That's where we are.
Right.
And so at this point, we will be far more implements in God's hand. Okay, this is, we're going to be withdrawn. He gets to decide how we come back.
That's right.
He gets to decide what we say, what we do, where we are, the environment around us, how we interact with that environment. We're still going to be individuals with free will and a desire to do the right thing, but far more, I don't know if the right word is controlled, but more heavily influenced by a miraculous standing. Like to realize that you're going to be pulled from the earth. Well, that's only happened twice before, where somebody in the midst of their lives was removed. Two fellas, Chinook and Elia. Turns out they're the two fellows that are coming back as witnesses. We just didn't know who Chinook was until recently. And we've always known who Elia was. So we've seen them withdrawn. We've never seen God bringing them back, which is far more extraordinary in its miraculous influence than him taking them, right?
Right.
So we know we're headed to that. And we know we're headed to a Temple Mount that's going to be purged of the Islamic scars, that's going to have the tent of the restoring witness restored, that we're going to retrieve the Ark of the Covenant, that there's going to be Malak that hold up the two tablets of stone, that we're going to have access to the original autograph that Moshe wrote of the Torah. That God is going to eliminate at the end of this all who are religious and political, conspiratorial. He's going to restore the earth to the conditions that were found in Eden. He's going to have orchestrate the sacrifice of the Adam Parah, this bloody red man of the earth who is a productive bull. And he's going to ignite the fires, and he's going to release copious amount of water from the temple. But before he does that, he's going to retrieve everybody who could benefit from it from all around the world during one night.
Yeah.
We'd be kidding ourselves to think that the way we have operated up to this point, which I think is pretty stupendous, what we've created here, but it pales in comparison to what the next 7 years is going to bring.
Yes.
So we're entering a much more structured period where I think that God, at this point, he will have grown comfortable with us expressing what we think should happen, so long as we do so with a full respect for this is crunch time.
Yeah.
I mean, this is you've got the God's favorite quarterback put in play, but God's calling the plays.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
He's got star receivers and a star running back and a spectacular offensive line and a marvelous defense, but God's calling the plays from here on in.
Score some touchdowns.
Yeah. And we need to keep the other side, which is against us by 1,000,000 to 1, from continuing to raise havoc to destroy. They would destroy Israel if we don't have some influence.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
I just think all of this is important for us to consider. So yes, I think it's important for everyone to know this is how we're negotiating with God. This is what he does listen. He does respond. And this has been our negotiation. Presented, recognizing that it's not as simple as more communication is going to deliver the desired results. It isn't that simple.
Mm-hmm.
I have not had to deal with a child who was, for example, addicted to drugs. But many, many parents have. And that they know that with that child, if they do not allow that child to finally fall on their own, and that child to finally say that they have the desire to recover, that more help is going to put them in a weaker position, not a stronger position. And the purpose of this time of trouble that Israel is entering and us being withdrawn is that same understanding of human psyche, that this fallen child, this religion addicted, politics addicted child that has become the children of Israel has to fall to the point that they want to get up.
And they haven't hit rock bottom.
They have not hit rock bottom, which means that God has to withdraw us for a long enough period of time for them to hit bottom before we try to pull them back up. And so from a mature point of view, as someone wanting to pull them back up and allowing reason to resonate with them, I'm saying, God, put us back in. But someone who is respectful of, this is Yahweh's situation with the children of Israel, and it's all riding on him making the right call as to when we're redeployed. If he says, I appreciate your enthusiasm, I've got it from here, I will, you'll get your chance. It's just not today. Right?
Rest up, put your feet in the sand, rest up, whatever, just take it easy. We'll get there. Yeah.
We'll get there. Yeah. And by the way, you're not going to rest up so much as you're going to prepare to be redeployed such that you're going to do everything to the maximum capability of a human being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
enriched and empowered for sure.
Yes. So here's my my second version of this, which is more consistent with the ones that I have rendered previously, and I think both could be true. And it will actually transpire at this period of time that the respect and reputation, the honorable standing and the dignity, and thus the very status, along with the prestige, wealth, and abundance, even the overall size of Jacob, representing Israel, will be impoverished. It's going to decrease for a prolonged period, being weakened to the point of no longer being sustainable or viable. Finally, falling flat, lacking what is essential to be seen as valuable, dangling by a tenuous thread. Then the most formidable warriors, the most fertile areas, the fattest, best protected, and most important places at the midsection of his physical body will be leaned. They're going to shrink, weakened, and wastefully impoverished, even participating in his own demise. Isaiah 17:4. So under this scenario,
that sounds more like rock bottom, or we're getting closer at least.
Yeah, that sounds like rock bottom. So the herald has to be removed for Israel to fall to rock bottom. So both interpretations, I think, are simultaneously true. It's just hard to present them as one unified thought because there are two layers of the same story.
Yes.
So as a result of what we have read and heard leading up to this, we have the fall of the Syrian government in Damascus, the disquieting situation in Jordan with the refugees, the strikes against the rising tide of Islamic jihadists in Gaza, then Lebanon, and now in Iran, and the foolhardy reliance on Donald Trump by Israel. It's now inevitable that the Jewish state is going to suffer a storm of devastating blows. The resulting formation of a legitimized, to the extent that's possible, terrorist state arising in the midst of Israel is going to significantly diminish the nation's size and standing. And with the assignment of an Islamic state carved out of Israel's heart, the Jewish nation will no longer be viable, And then Alaska 2.0 is inevitable, and it's on the horizon. So this surrender of Israeli land will be part of this ill-fated, wrong-headed two-state solution that is so promoted by the world at large. Let me get the Wookiee down here. He has found something that is far more interesting, I guess, than our show. There's only so much you can do with the Wook. I think it's a orange ball on his bed, but there you go. We just aren't nearly as interesting as we might think we are to Wookiees. But Israel is religiously devoted to its own demise, and those who seek its annihilation are religiously devoted to the genocide of Jews. We're going to see a reenactment of what happened at Kabar 1,400 years ago, just as 10/7 of 23 was a reenactment of the Kabar raid. So with all of this being the case, and I think there's good and bad news and all of this, we have I think we have to view it, and we'll go ahead and share the presentation of the next verse, which is, I think, parallel to what we've just read. It says, then he will be, as it comes to exist, comparable to a katsir. And that's a reaper of the harvest. As an asaph, as one collecting and assembling the ingathering, and withdrawing and escorting the kama, the standing grain. So that Bashar is now being equated. That's just to underscore that God was talking about a person in the previous statement, not just of Israel being thinned, because he goes immediately. So then he will be as one who is comparable to a katsir, a reaper of the harvest, as an asaph, as one collecting and assembling the ingathering and withdrawing and escorting the kama, the standing grain that is an essential part of Shabuah. Shabuah is a harvest of kama, of standing grain. And so his Zeroah, Yahweh's Zeroah, the one cultivating the seeds sown for his harvest to be fruitful and productive, he's going to reap this harvest from the field with unfolding implications, even as time is cut short during an anguishing period. All for the first fruits that will be flowing like a stream of grain. In addition, then, he will actually come to exist as someone comparable to a lakat, as one who gleans the final and more challenging ingathering, rapidly removing what remains of the fruit of the stems off the main branch, appearing out of a torrent of floodwaters, moving as a stream from one place to another, all in linear fashion. In the profound depths of Raphaim, where the sick will be healed, the defective are going to be restored, while those who remain feeble will falter, and the souls of the dead will remain. Yasha'Yah 17:5. It's a nice presentation of the harvest, isn't it?
It is. Harvests, yeah.
Yeah.
And particularly of how Yahweh is going to enable this harvest through his chosen implement, who he likes to call a reaper, an ingatherer. So many of the titles that Yahweh chooses for this role are descriptive. A Bashar, a human herald, a Zeroah, one who is cultivating this harvest as a strong arm. God loves to use descriptive titles. Yeah. And so he's got a bunch of them for this, and those who are gleaned are called kama, standing grain. So everyone is described. So what I think the dual interpretations provide is for the harvest to take place with fully 7 years and 4 months of the time of trouble, as opposed to 6 years and 3 months.
Mhm.
So if it's next year, it's 6 years and 3 months, as opposed to 7 years and 4 months. It makes it possible for this harvest of very few individuals who represent standing grain to take place 11 days from now. Even without Israel forfeiting its heart for an Islamic State. So long as that forfeited heart transpires, the two-state non-solution transpires over the next year, and we enter the time of trouble, and it becomes particularly frustrating by Shavuot a year from now.
Yeah.
It also makes it possible for the tearing apart of Israel, the forfeiting of its waste to create an Islamic State, can take place anytime over the next 12 months, and the harvest could be on June 11th of 2027. And that both the removal of the Bashar and the removal of the very heart of Israel are events that take place within the bookends of the two Shavuos. Shavuot May 22nd and Shavuot June 11th, with the harvest taking place on one of the two.
Yeah,
it just makes
I
it
don't know that it'll be
possible.
Terminus, but it's got to be within the year. But the way it reads, one event is right on top of the other. The
Yes.
two-state and the harvest. It's
Yes. Yep.
I'm reading it differently. I'm reading it differently.
What are you reading?
We have, he will be removed, okay, and that could happen at Shabuah of 26, okay, and then he conducts a harvest, the Shabuah harvest, in June 10th. So there's a real good possibility that we're going to be out here trying to yada yada all by ourselves, trying to do shows, trying to do something, and that you will go and then swing back by a year later and pick the rest of us up.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's possible. And I think that if you read both layers, it's not only possible, but it's what we have been planning for. And if you think about the transition that took place 18 months ago, where we developed an entirely new core group and began realizing that our entire effort has to be to prepare this core group to be able to perform. And that is when we moved away from social media to the Yasha'Yah.com site and built it to what it is now. That has been the entire mindset, is that we need to prepare a group of men and women to be able to serve in this capacity. And that and when I began to talk about this weekend, Think Torah as a Yasha'Yah blog, and Love Torah as a Yasha'Yah blog, and the Covenant Family as one, and the Yasha'Yah Book Club as one, that whole concept was without me. I'm not part of any of those.
It was that became obvious. Yes.
Yes. That I'm not
reaching in the dark here.
Right. That I wasn't trying to make that connection, but you made it. By saying I'm not trying to make the connection. I was trying to take one step after another to create the kind of an environment where we have now the books, the vlog, the communication capability through chat, the timeline, the glossary, the Dead Sea Scrolls, the translations, the grammar, that we have the substance that I could leave, be removed. And And rather than the family faltering, the family would thrive.
Yeah. Continuity of message. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
Continuity of purpose. Absolutely.
Yes. I read a post from somebody who was telling their story where they talked about some 15 different people in the covenant family. Both of you guys were mentioned by this individual. And my wife was also mentioned by this individual. I was not. So I'm reading this whole thing. And it was, and rather than, saying, well, I think maybe I should
Wait a second.
get an honorable mention just for bringing everybody together. But no, what I was looking for is this the first time that somebody is presenting their story and they talk about the people that I've helped teach and educate and prepare such that I'm not mentioned? And for me, that is the greatest joy of all. That means that you have actually achieved what God wanted, which is to prepare people that can achieve and perform and be productive independently. And this was a marvelous person. And he talked about all the way that all these various people interacted with him along the way and reached out to him and answered his questions and were there for him. Or her. I'm not trying to present as somebody by male or female, but it was the sign that we had reached this point. And so all of the ideas that were being thrown out, like the admin tool, so that we can manage this site, that we have the Yasha'Yah book club. What a wonderful way to do it independently. Thinking Torah for the more erudite members of our Torah family, and for those who love the emotional part of being in a family, and it's a huge part of it, the loving Torah, and then the covenant family presentation. We do an interview of everybody who is part of our family, and they get to tell their story. I think it is absolutely possible. And if it is possible, then I would be allowed to do the same thing that I have done for 6,000 years now. Yeah. Miss Amma gets to come with me, if that is what it is saying, and that you come back for everybody. Now, I'm not saying that is the proper interpretation, but what this more layered analysis did of Isaiah 17:4 is it opened up that as a possibility
in our head. Well, yes, it opened up a possibility in our heads. Absolutely. That the shock, the gut punch is taken care of, is off now. Right. It's the whole reason why you game plan 100 different scenarios that absolutely will never happen, but just in case, I got a widget for that one. Yeah.
I got a widget for that one. Yes. And if you're prepared, it's not a shocking event to you.
Yes.
No. And you're saying, all right, well, we weren't left because we didn't measure up. We were left because we did measure up.
Right.
And now is our opportunity to perform for Yahweh. And then it will be our time to be withdrawn. We also get this working vacation for a bit of time. Israel can continue to fall, and then we're there to pick up Israel as a family in the end, showing how we will work together in those last 3.5 years.
No, and you have been a great teacher, and so it makes all the sense in the world to me that we're being prepared. We need to grow up. We need to step up and step into roles, and I've been trying to do that, as Kevin mentioned, but you see it all over the covenant family stepping up and trying to grow, because at some point there's not hand holding. So we're being prepared now, and
and we all need to step up, and that's why we have a core group that is capable of doing this. And great. I think that's the beauty of it. That is your conclusion, Kevin, is exactly where I thought we were headed. I think whether now I'm going to say whether or not it plays out that way, that is the mindset that we should game plan for.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that is the entire intent of Yahweh, is that he wants us to game plan for that, because that's his goal going forward. The celebration of Sukkah and the 1,000 years of the return to Eden has to work that way. Literally, it has to work that way.
Yes.
And there will be the Yasha'Yah book club, and there will be the Thinking Torah vlog, and there will be the Loving Torah vlog, and there will be the interview of those that have made the right decision, who were part of the Shabuah harvest and later the Teruah harvest. All of that is going to transpire, and we are going to be rallying around the Yasha'Yah.com website. And the books will expand and be improved, and the interactive nature of that website will continue to improve, and more people will make contributions. And part of the contribution is now not to ask, what can I do? Because there are so many things that are obvious to do. We've laid out the Talking Torah and of Loving Torah and Thinking Torah and the Yasha'Yah book club, and everybody knows we're using StreamYard to produce these. Now, Lay and I learned StreamYard before Rich and Kevin. You guys
Yes.
Took it to the next level, but we learned it well enough that we produced shows. We were on our own for like 3 months before we were undergirded by people that know it a lot better than we do. But to host these shows, they ought not have to lean on the two of you making your life so that you have no life other than doing that for them. And they ought not be in a position where they say, we want to do this. Now, how do we do it? You know how many tutorials there are on StreamYard?
So, yeah.
Gazillions.
Absolutely.
Yes. And so, what we have learned is that you don't have to have a couple of $100,000 worth of gear to be able to vlog. You can use your phone. You don't have to have spectacular lights.
Is 100% mobile. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. But somebody, you can do a tutorial. Maybe we can do a tutorial on these. Here's the kind of things that you can do to set yourself up to be an effective person on this. And we start off, we host them, and then we turn them loose and go on their own. That's what needs to be done. In the meantime, there's every blog that we have posted that can be commented on. Every vlog that we posted, you can write comments on. Every topic you can communicate on and enrich the family through this process. There are lots of ways to contribute.
Yeah, because there's folks out there that are speaking to each other on the phone, right? That this person calls this person, and then maybe they'll call someone else, and they have good 1 hour conversations or whatever. They have their go-to Torah buddy, right? That they want to talk about whatever was in the show, whatever was written, and all we're asking or proposing is that you take that to the next level, and let's talk with 60 people at once instead of just one. Right.
It's been my style. For a long time. Some people like it, some people don't. But I used to be asked a lot of questions, and and it's email, and I said, I will answer this question, but only if I can make the answer public. There's just no reason to have private teaching. Yeah, let's have everything be public and have everybody be able to view the answer, because then it helps many people as opposed to one person. And so that's the thing that I like about, for example, the blog page or the vlog page, is that they enable us to share with many people. And that's why I like the topics in chat, is that we don't have to, there's very few things that we should do privately. Even if we're introverts, we should make everything a public advantage. And that's what we're asking of people. Everybody has read the books. Many people have read the books many times. Pick a book and every week do a chapter as a Torah study, and pick the, 4 to 8 people that you most enjoy working with, and there could be 2 or 3 yada yada book clubs, and you're presenting your study of those chapters of those books in a vlog-like format where it's posted. Do they have to be polished? No.
That's a brilliant idea. This is great.
Yeah.
You got your dog on the desk. We're not trying to be TV heroes here. You know what I'm saying?
Right. And there's a reason that I wear shirts like this, and I have the dog on the desk, and that is to convey the fact that we're not trying to impress anyone.
Right.
We're here to provide information in a congenial, family-oriented environment, and if you're comfortable with that, based on the value of the information, great. If you want to be impressed by numbers, we cannot and will not deliver that, because the moment we were to become polished and popular, we would cease to be what Yahweh wants.
Yeah, we have to rethink things, wouldn't we? Like, this is going really well. We have 7 million followers online. Whoa, something ain't right. We have stepped off the path somewhere.
We have really stepped off the path, because Yahweh's path is very narrow. He's in the end, it's thousands, and thousands amongst billions is 1 in a million. That is our audience. We have to be opposed to everything that draws an audience. Yep. We have to be opposed to racism and anti-Semitism and conspiracy and religion and politics and patriotism and militarism. Yeah. Now, what's left is a tiny percentage of the world's population, because those things we have to be against, but the things we have to be for is being open-minded and committed, desirous of learning. As Kirk always says, we have to have the want to, and the want to's got to be big. And so you've got to have the desire to learn, be open to learning, while also abandoning militarism, conspiracy, politics, and anti-Semitism, and all of these things that are so popular in the world. And that's going to make for a very small audience, particularly when young people today don't like to read, and they're not even fond of thinking.
Right.
And the religious are incapable of thinking, and the overtly political are immune to evidence and reason, just as are the religious. And conspiracy has run amok, and anti-Semitism is ubiquitous. Yeah. So that if you're an introvert, you're going to be very comfortable, because you're not going to have a big audience.
That's right. You don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, right. And you want to have the dog in your lap, that's just fine.
Yep.
All right, I think we'll conclude this program, Kevin. I know we didn't do any news as part of the vlog on the blog, but I think what we talked
There's
about...
some news here. There's some news here. Don't worry.
Yeah, there is. There is some
plenty of news.
There is some news here.
If you're listening,
news. Yeah, there's big news here as to what's going to happen over the next 7 years. As we just read future history. We read tomorrow's newspaper today. Most important news a person could possibly deal with. So, Will, it's always a pleasure to have you. It's kind of nice to have you here on a show where it's just Kevin and I, because on the Family Hour, you're one of a whole bunch of people. I think we have 10 participants in that show now. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's hard to focus on any one individual. And we had more quality time in that regard. And that's one of the reasons I like doing this show with Kevin. He kind of says, all right, this is Will's time to showcase. I'll put myself in the little circle. I'll bring Will up, and you guys can chat for a while. And that's why I think that most people have recognized that Kevin and I have a really good working way on this show. Yeah. And that we're both dependent on our work with Rich, who's just happy as he can be behind the scene, and don't ask me a question as I'm monitoring like 8 different screens simultaneously, because while I'm hearing, I will listen to the show when I go home tonight, but I can't do anything other than keep us on track between now and then. And we are working very effectively together, and we will for the next 1,000 years.
Yeah, this is just the beginning.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you.
One good news is that I'm making a lot of progress on getting the Coming Homes ready to present as unpublished books, the 3 versions of them. And it appears that I may be able to turn to translating Ruth sooner rather than later. You have the Ruth backdrop there in the field. I think the Ruth and Boaz is such an it's like the center spoke of the hub of Yahweh's story of how in right around year 3000 Yah, he introduces Ruth and Boaz, and they give birth to the kinsman redeemer, and how that really is the core. That's the heart, literally the heart of Yahweh's story. And so I'm really looking forward to being able to share that, and hopefully we have enough time to pull it off.
No, it's very exciting.
If not, I'll have to send. I'll have to send telegrams from Shamaim and say, "Hey, could you post this? Post this for me."
Wasn't that the line that Shlomo used? But when you hear his voice coming out of the heavens, and it's
that's
satellite radio.
It's written in the call stem.
Yeah, that was the line that Solomon used. I agree with you.
Just jokes.
Yep. Well, thank you, guys. I really enjoyed this. It's fun, fun discussion. Favorite material, a marvelous use of our time. Thank you so much, and we'll be with you again later today.
All right, fellas.
Shabbat shalom.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. That was Fetch. Gotta run now. Catch Yah on our next podcast.